What's up, folks? How's it going? Today we're going to talk about product development process from the start to the end. Tons of curriculum packed. I'm super excited. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. So if I'm audible, let me know. All right, so I'm going to assume that I'm audible. All right, so without any delay, we're going to get started. So one of the interesting, one of the reasons to have this sort of, set up and do live is because there's a lot of follow-up questions and nuances that we can cover that may not get covered in a video, and also wanted to try just, seeing how live works. I'm just also trying to go live on this side on Instagram just to see. All right, so what we're gonna do today is walk through the entire process, and it's not necessary that that the same process is followed throughout. But it's every company will have its own version of this process for sure. But the overall idea, the overarching idea, is to be able to sort of get an idea of what it looks like in most companies, what parameters are thought through, and then we can move on to any questions you folks have. So I'm going to switch to screen sharing. I hope it's visible, and that's what we're going to talk about: various stages of product and design development. Folks, what's up on Instagram? This is where we are at, talking about product development, and just you should definitely join us. Click the link, pin link, and you will be able to join us. So yeah, moving on, what we're going to talk about is, and I'm going to turn this around so you folks can probably see from here as well. I don't know if that's visible. Yeah. So one of the first things I wanted to speak about was, where do ideas even come from, right? And my computer is super laggy. It's if you see that animation laggy on the video, it's not your internet connection. It's most likely my CPU, which is struggling right now to do this live stream. But yeah, so where do ideas even come from? One of the top 3 places that ideas come from, one of the places is definitely your customers, right? You have tons of feedback coming in. You may have research going on with your customers. So a lot of that helps in terms of getting ideas. Your customer supports and queries can be a large part of, can make a pool of ideas. Then what starts to happen is, we say business comes up with ideas, right? Like marketing may want to try something new, business may want to enter a new field that they are interested in. So all of that results in the end in some kind of idea pool. It can come from business, customer, your competitor, or it can be inbred from, let's say, a design team or a product team or engineering team, depending on what kind of product that you're building at the moment, right? So from there we move on to the second part, which I think I should just disable the animation because it's clearly struggling. The second thing I want to talk about is prioritization, right? How does prioritization and scoping work? That's a big chunk of what product managers spend their time on, what a lot of teams, product teams, spend quite a significant amount of time on it. How do we prioritization? How do we scope a certain pet? Some framework, but most frameworks, there are a bunch of frameworks out there that can help you, that help product managers look at this particular piece. But the one that we want to talk about, the biggest things people look at is market sizes, and this is a very different approach from what typically designers take. Right, one of the biggest differences that you from designers is you focus on a single user as a designer, versus a product manager, you're focused on an entire market. Right, so that's the biggest difference you see, in consideration of product managers. The second thing, obviously, you look at is impact on the business. Right, how much is it engagement to drive up LTV, which is lifetime value. So you already have customers and you want them to you want to sell something. So what is the impact of the business? What is the size of that market? Then third thing that I typically look at is the cost and the effort in terms of human beings will required. What kind of what if there's only a limited number of people in a team, so you can't assign unlimited number of projects. Right? So you have to choose. So if this project takes precedence, then what is the next project that you could be assigning? What are you doing there? The last one that I want to talk about is typically confidence or inclination. This is typically ambiguous, very ambiguous, but what it essentially means is how confident is the team on this given idea, right? How confident do they feel particularly about this? So the first frame that I want to discuss, right, there are a bunch of frameworks that can help you sort of figure that piece out, framework or AARRR framework. And this framework, the first piece is acquisition, right? You look at how many customers can you acquire, right? Typically product marketing will be looking at this, sales will be looking at this. The second thing you look at is activation, right? Activation is the key thing you want your customers to do. For example, on Facebook, it could be creating the first post, or Twitter, it could be following ample people and creating the first tweet, having the first aha moment, right? So that is what you're focused on as when you're talking about activation, right? The last part that happens is revenue. So revenue will be all around like purchase, sale, what you're in the end selling, and then we talk about retention, right? How many of those customers are you able to retain in your venue? For example, let's say if you were selling a subscription, how many people retain month over month? Some will drop out over time, like let's say for something like Netflix. In terms of Amazon, what is your repeat order, right? For first time, if you purchase on Amazon, they would have spent a significant amount of money. Okay, we are back on YouTube, hopefully. Let me know, folks, if you can hear me, if the audio is any better, if the lag is less. I'm just trying to figure out a way to get back to Figma. Okay. So without any further delay, let's get started. You're able to see my screen. Just gonna start again. We were talking about here as well. Just gonna switch this here. You folks can see as well. So we spoke about where ideas come from. They come from business. They can come from customer support. They can come from another business teams. They can come from bunch of different areas can be there where you can have ideas coming from. And but then the second question that comes is, how do you prioritize? And folks, I'm just quickly gonna check my audio, which is the audio source. Audio source looks fine. So the first thing frameworks focus on is market size. How many customers will there be in the market? And we have the one of the frameworks that talks about that is what is the full market size in the world, how many customers exist. At the same time, how many customers can you actually reach out from with your messaging, and the last, how many will actually pay, and then how many will you actually be able to retain, right? How much will it cost to build this? There's always a cost associated. There's limited number of people in a team. You can't assign a unlimited number of projects. You have to, this is one of the important factors that come into consideration. And of course, the confidence of the team. How, given the experts, being the experts, that you are in the market, how are you expecting all of this to evolve? That becomes an important factor as well. So one of the frameworks that I want to talk about is Pirate framework, which is AARRR framework. First, it talks about acquisition. How will you get the customers? How many customers do you think you can acquire? The second is, of course, activation, which talks about how many of these are you able to, eventually activate and make them into paying customers or engaged customers. This can then turn into eventually into revenue, which could be ad revenue or could be purchase revenue, sale revenue, or subscription revenue. And the last one is a repeat purchase, right? How many people are repeating, for example, Amazon on repeat order. Swiggy would have spent a lot of time to get you download your first app. They give tons of cashbacks, right? That was they gave away revenue for retention. So over time, you get used to using that app, ordering from Swiggy or Zomato, and that becomes the retention strategy, right? And then eventually people hope that you will invite the user. That's why you will see heavy referral program models, because most of the startups follow this sort of model somewhere or the other. And the more folks you invite, the cheaper it is for the company to acquire these customers into the product, right? Another framework that I wanted to speak about is called RICE framework. RICE again is an acronym. The R stands for reach. How many people can you reach? What is the into impact, into confidence, divided by effort? And you can have a scale of 0 to 5. And given the company and the dynamics in the market you are in, you can decide how do you assign score. But it's more important to decide what is the meaning of 0, what is the meaning of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, before you get to this exercise. Otherwise, it may not work as well. This is very important. Again, if you're comparing, all of these frameworks work whether if you're comparing all the products together, or if you're comparing all the features of a given product with each other. It does not work to compare one feature of one product with another feature of another product. The other one that I want to talk about is Kano model, which is very is simply a 2x2 matrix, where you talk about features that are not implemented, that are fully implemented. If they are not, some things by implementation or not full implementation, customer can feel dissatisfied or customer can feel satisfied. So this overall gives us three kinds of features we can talk about, or three kind of patterns. One is very basic things that you must have, everyone must have. For example, uh, let's talk about social networking. Every social networking has DM, right? So if DMs do not exist in your social networking, that is sort of a basic feature. Performance feature is your main core feature. For example, on YouTube, it's creating and watching videos. On Twitter, it's tweeting and engaging with that tweets. And delighters are on over the top things that really are the specialty of that platform, or by the matter of design or by matter of service or quality, you add certain delighters which are unique to you. For example, some people love how seamless Amazon feels. How Apple ecosystem just works, comes together when you are into Apple products. So all of those become delighters, and they are also trying to catch up. For example, having a keyboard, etc., is just basic performance. Having a MacBook camera, which is very basic, is just they treat as a basic thing, but they treat the touch bar as a delighter. So that is where one of the examples of how you could look at the features of MacBook as a product with these various models. Another interesting methodology, again, this is very interesting for building MVPs, is storyboarding. This is different from storyboarding we talk about in design. How it differs is you sort of lay out, okay, this is what one sort of one thing that your product does, second thing that your product does. So scene 1, 2, 3, 4 are various scenes describing the various problems statement that a customer encounters while using your product, or hires your product, jobs to be done framework, hires your sort of product to solve a problem. So let's talk about this analogy. What if a customer hires your product to solve something in their life, right? So using that analogy, what are these several scenes that they may go through? Then you may list down specific features they may find useful, and then you sort of draw this line, right, to talk about which are the critical essential features and which are not so critical. Again, you can combine these methods. For example, you could combine this with Kano model to really get into detail of what should be prioritized first. And then once the prioritization is done, then we come to design process. And this is where I also want to talk about, and I don't want to get too deep into design process right away, but one of the essential things that happens in a design process is that there is no single process. And I've been writing a script on YouTube, for one of the YouTube videos for the longest time. There is no one single design process. Every company's design process roughly reflects some certain parts, which some of the theories like design thinking, etc., cover very well. But everyone's process is unique. Every project's process is unique. and no matter what you do, like it's futile to try to standardize, that sort of behavior. So again, going back to details of how this can work. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about is typically that happens in this sort of format, is that you start with research and gathering certain kind of context. The second thing that happens is, of course, breaking down the problems, right? People talk about understand the problem better, but what they essentially mean is you have broken down the problem into all its subcomponents, which are far easier to answer than earlier the problem statement was. Of course, then you begin solving, you begin iterating, and then you start with prototyping, refinement, the more details sort of start to come into design. And then typically either you will make a hypothesis, okay, but we have two versions, based on two hypotheses, this is what we assume, versus like we just go out and roll out the design. And then the final part of handoff and documentation. Now in this particular video, we will not dive too deep into the design process, because that can be a separate discussion on its own. But this is roughly all the steps that go. A lot of people can be involved. For example, the research can be done by market researcher, external researcher agency, inside UX researcher, or a designer who is also doubling up as a researcher. Breaking down the problem can happen in collaboration with engineering or with product management. Solving an iteration again happens with big amount of teams, are present to sort of solve that problem. And then finally, when you're releasing it, making prototypes, you can start testing it with users before releasing it. And finally, the documentation and handoff happens. And design, like we talk about design day in day out, so I'm going to keep this part short, and assuming that we will there are the videos that you can watch on the detailed design process. There are 2-3 case studies on my channel that you can watch around that. And we're going to move on to what is happening in parallel in the product manager's world, right, or engineers world. What is being what happened in the beginning is, when we started scoping, we started fleshing out a PRD. And I have spoken about PRDs on multiple time occasions. The one you can find out is on Abhinav Chikara's channel. The link is in the description already. It's timestamped, so you can find the exact moment I start talking about what goes into a PRD. But the aim of PRD is to have everything that a project needs to do, a product or feature needs to do, to cover that, to bring everybody on the same page, and to describe the product in terms of its functionality and non-functional and non-functional parts. What does it do, and what are the quality and standards it should uphold, and what are our goals with it, right? Moving on from there, finally, we are ready. Once we have designs, we will be somewhere around that time, we'll be ready for engineering and development. And when it comes to engineering and development, there can be various ways they approach, but most will end up writing a PRD parallel in this world, which is called an ERD, right, which is an engineering requirement document. What an ERD contains is typically this kind of stuff. It will have API endpoints, what will be the backend APIs that have to be developed. It'll talk about what services they need to build, what are the guarantees and contracts, and again, API endpoints will be there with services. What are the algorithms or data models that are required? They may build entity relation maps, or entity relation diagrams, which is also shortened to ERD, which is also very confusing. So I'm also like gonna invite an engineer very soon on the channel to talk about their journey, not only their journey, what they do, but also about some of these concepts. So there are two, and I can see a typo already, that was supposed to be sprint, but there are two methodologies that we can talk about when it comes to product development. One is sprint and one is waterfall. They typically come from product management or engineering background, right? Like that is whom you will see talking about this. What sprint means is, whatever clarity you have 2 weeks or 3 weeks sprints, or 4 week sprint, or 1 week sprint, typically 1 to 2 weeks. And whatever clarity you have, let's say you're building 3 products, product A, product B, product C, but only some 2 features are ready and one small part of small feature is ready. And that's good enough for agile and sprint methodology, right? You just pick that as a user story, and then you run with that. Waterfall versus will wait for the entire documentation and specification to finish, and will then exactly render that documentation into a software, right? Typically, that this looks like, engineering process will look like, you will convert it into ERD or user stories. What user stories look like are they shippable, testable, and measurable deliverable units. For example, if I was building WhatsApp payments, right, a feature, then a user story would be custom, like the user should be able to send money, But for that, I need another user story. The user should be able to activate payment option with UPI. So those are two user stories that need to be picked up together. They can be measured together. First, maybe engineering can pick up just ability to onboard user onto UPI in the backend, and no and front end is ready, but nothing is released to the customer. When the second user story is picked up, let's say in the next sprint, then we release all of it to the user. So product can be built over time, and you will see a lot of features improving over time or releasing, becoming fuller over time, and that is most likely they're following agile and sprint methodology. And or you follow waterfall, where everything is written. Typically enterprise software follow that kind of methodology, that everything is predefined, especially if you were running scientific contract, manufacturing contract, service based contract. There's a lot of stuff that where you cannot go agile. So in those cases, typically you take a waterfall approach. A lot of companies split this as well. Till design, they will follow a certain approach. Then after design, they will follow. When it comes to engineering, they'll follow a very different approach. All the stand-up stuff you hear, like people are having stand-up, are typical to agile methodology and sprint methodology. Even though the agile manifesto, which is the source of agile, does not really call for daily stand-ups necessarily, but sprints now are associated heavily with agile. Moving on to once engineering has finally worked on it, they'll keep building. Once they're assigned, they will work on these individual bits. There's backend involved, there's front end involved. uh, y- you know in the backend and front end, what happens is backend is building APIs and server what they're doing, right? For example, you send money using your app on UPI. So the app you're seeing is front end, but what is happening on the server is the backend. They're talking through this thing called API, right? So the API contracts will be built between front end and back end. Once they build it out, other engineering people will come in, and finally, once they're ready, they will do quality analysis and testing. There are two kinds of quality analysis and testing that goes on. One is an automated testing. One is manual testing. Automated testing can be unit test, where you check things like, is discount code working? When I change quantity of an item, is it working? And all those pieces. In manual testing, you may have things like, okay, there's a process like capture or something which is manually required to be processed. Then you will do manual testing, right? And once the testing is ready, there are four kind of bugs that can emerge. Those four bugs typically that people can have different classification, but typically they are P0 to P3. P0 is a functional bug, which means it breaks something which is the heart and soul of the feature of the product, right? If the button is not clickable, it's P0, like it's just broken. P2 is only a certain subset of users or customers will be affected. Sorry, P1. P2 will be okay. It's gonna affect a lot of people, but it's not the main objective of the entire thing. For example, maybe a link on the footer is not working, right? And P3 is just aesthetic bugs. It just something doesn't look right. The color is not picked up right. In certain scenarios, it can become a P0 bug because maybe the wrong color is coming up, which makes the button invisible. But in most cases, aesthetic changes, failures are just P3 bugs. That is why most of the time designers will keep crying out that I've been asking them to fix this one small color bug since ages, but it just does not get fixed. That's most likely the reason it just never comes up in the priority order and when they're discussing sprints. The last part that I want to talk about that happens a lot in product, and this happens right along with it. And all of these things happen in parallel, right? They're not happening. It's not like product analytics starts at this point. They may have started very early on. They may have been involved, and now they're getting involved again, right? So what product analytics does is, how do you know what is happening out there in the product? How is WhatsApp seeing? How's Twitter? How's YouTube seeing that you are using all of these features? How do they know that you're using live chat? Every single time you post a message, a software running on the front end, right, on your browser or in your app, sends out a signal to their server analytics product, which then picks up that signal and then counts that, right, keeps all these events. So this is called typically events-based analytics, which most product companies use. So you keep a log of every event and all the details. Later on, using all the events, I can see the full picture of what's happening on the product. I can ask questions. For example, how many people watched this live stream? How many people out of those used this live chat feature? How many people liked, share, or subscribed on this particular video? So all of these numbers I can ask from that event, or I can ask at a general platform level, like as YouTube as a company can ask, how many people went live today on my platform? So all of these kind of analytics become possible, right? There are various ways to dissect. And there's a video that came out on measuring design impact that you should go and watch on Indian design community. The link I posted on my Instagram and on Twitter. And that goes a little bit on the analytics from design side. and maybe where somewhere we can dive deeper into how funnels are built, how cohorts are built, and how product analytics in detail looks like in some other video. But quickly speaking, these are the analytics tool you will see most companies using. Most companies start out with just using Google Analytics as their basic tool. You will see traffic, etc., and then people will start adding Google Tag Manager because Facebook pixel and this pixel and marketing will start bringing all these pixels in. If a product is you have product managers of data analytics or product analytics sitting in your company, most likely they'll be using a product analytics tool like Mixpanel or Amplitude. Or if you really have a lot of events, or you are a very bootstrap startup, you may decide to host all these events in your database, run your own server to store these events. In the end, it's just a DB running a front end software, and use something like Metabase, which is open source. And then you have things like Hotjar, Fullstory, etc., to dive deeper into individual people's story. So this is what product analytics tool looks like. Now we have built a product, right? Product is almost ready, but when we release it out there, how will the customers, right, know about that this product is ready and ready to go out there in the market? Someone has to tell them. Let's say WhatsApp rolls out a new feature. Let's say YouTube rolls out a new feature, right? How do you get to know that there's a new feature out there? When Instagram put out stories, how did you know? So that is the work of typically a product marketing manager. And they've devised something called a GTM plan, or go-to-market plan, or a rollout plan, or release plan. You would have often heard Facebook, etc., talking about, oh, we are rolling out this new feature to users, right? So not all products and not all features are rolled out in one single go, especially when a company is huge and user base is huge, because you're not sure it works, how people react to it, how people are going to like it or not. So that is when people begin to look at the limited rollouts, so you have time to get feedback, to make improvements, to measure success, to improve the tweak the product to improve its success metrics, or to even roll back certain changes which you're not sure about, which all becomes a part of a release plan, including all the marketing effort, all the emails that will go out, which brings us to the tools product marketing managers use. And you will be familiar with it when I bring this up, right? Product marketing uses these tools. They use the browser pop-up, allow me to send notifications, things you see. Product marketers do that. Mailchimp, newsletter, click here, Amazon has listed something new. All of those pieces are your blog updates, product updates, notification, in product banners. All of these items are done, all of these tools are used by product marketing managers, and they use to get adoption. Their main goal is to get you to adopt these new features, right? So when Instagram now has built this audio in their DMs, so right now you can clearly see it's not being promoted that much. Most likely the product marketing manager is not yet assigned. And once they are assigned, you will start seeing it's being promoted. Or if they don't see enough engagement, you may start seeing it being rolled back or being hidden behind a kebab menu. Um, and that is when you finally are ready. After the QA has reviewed everything is working, data is coming in, you start to roll out to users, right? And that is when you bet, like, and this is how this works in companies. This is the language used, that when you're rolling out, it's considered a limited availability, right? It's only available to limited set of people. A lot of people will before limited availability will even have a beta program. So a lot of places like Snapchat, etc., you can join beta programs, so you get some features earlier which may be buggy, and then they get limited availability. And then when they're available to everyone, we call that the feature or the product is generally available, or right, or the product or feature will be rolled back. For example, there was a talk where Instagram was rolling out hiding likes, right, on Instagram. But right, we heard a lot of talk about it and people getting it, but now we don't hear as much. So most likely they have stopped the rollout, or they're rolling it back. So if any of you recently got Instagram likes hidden on Instagram, or got it back after getting hidden, let's talk about it in the comments. And that's roughly what the entire process looks like. So another way to look at this is product life cycle. And product life cycle is the conception, the launch, the rollout, the service period. And one thing we did not talk about in product life cycle is the end of support of product life cycle, right? When you are no longer going to continue that product. For example, Apple is not servicing iPhone 3 or iPhone 4, 5 anymore, and that is at end of support, right? So the product life cycle has ended from company's point of view and from legal point of view, right? Same thing could be, let's say a lot of customers use a certain product that you have built. they pay for it, but you want to change, upgrade them to a newer version because maintaining the old version is getting very costly. So then you will start transitioning and the people and sunsetting the old product. And how should that be done? What legal considerations are there? What technical considerations should be made? Can be pre-documented while you're building the product, right? So whoever is at that time is sunsetting the product or looking at the end of product can take care of this, right? Um, and that is how product gets launched, and now our product is out there in the hands of our customers. And one of the primary things you will see happening there is all the people, especially product managers, data engineers, designers, will be glued to their Mixpanel, Google Analytics, or whatever dashboard they have to watch most likely the numbers, right? And looking at the support tickets to see what is going on, whether their product was success or a failure. And how do they know whether it's successful or failure? So for example, in case of, we were talking about WhatsApp payments, how many people click that button versus how many onboard versus how many make their first payment to a friend. This is a funnel, right? This is step by step, step 1, step 2, step 3. So this is when how they will look at the success, that about 10,000 people got this feature, out of which 2,000 noticed it, out of which 500 got onboarded, and 100 people today sent their first UPI payment on WhatsApp. So this is the kind of dashboard they will build, and these are the kind of numbers they will look at, right? When I'm done with this YouTube video, when this goes out, you bet I'll go back when I end the stream, I'll refresh and I'll check what are the analytics and numbers on this product, because this can be thought of as a product as well, right? You are consuming this product, and I can go back and check the analytics of how well it did or how well it didn't do. And that is, folks, the end of our conversation. And now we are ready for, like, if any conversation you may have around this, whatever you talk about. That is how a product goes from start to finish, and wanted to make like very quick one around this. So I hope this was helpful. And now we can get into any questions you had specifically around this. Uh, Open to questions here on Instagram or on what is your process and deliverables. Yeah, so we did not talk about deliverables. Let's talk about quickly throughout the process what are deliverables from different people. If you give me a second, I will switch on my light, which is for some reason has gotten off. Back again, folks. So what are the deliverables of various different peoples throughout this entire process? So the first people we spoke about is in the process was product people or business people, or where the idea comes from. Their deliverable is to convince the company, the stakeholders, that this problem is legit, to build a business case for their problem statement, that it should be solved, that it's worth solving. For product manager, it's to work on that framework, the RISE framework, or whatever framework, prioritization framework we are using, to work that bit out, right? How is that going to work? And to convince the rest of the company that this is what's doing, this is not worth doing. A lot of times what happens is the framework says something else, but a product manager or company will decide to still go against it, because they have an insight which the framework does not cover based on the gut feel, etc. Or they will use narratives or their people skills or influence skills to change the narrative, or increase the confidence part of, in the RISE framework we talked about confidence. So how do you increase the confidence in this variable? So in some places that can happen as well, because in a lot, like think about a thing like Twitter, right? When it came out, it's very hard to put it into any sort of framework. Like, you just send out a message for 180 characters, like nobody would have funded that sort of thing, right? Yes, Meenal, the session will be saved live for sure. And then after product managers have gotten started, then they deliver PRD, and PRD can have all a product manager does not necessarily write the entire PRD, but they own that, the fact that all the questions are answered, and the fact that PRD is absolutely clear and everybody who needs to be informed is informed, etc. Right? So those are the important pieces. So in essence, a product manager owns the PRD but does not write the entirety of it, right? Some parts will be written by engineering, the wireframes, etc. will be filled in by design. Then we come to researchers. Researchers will typically deliver insights, or they will deliver, there can be various things. They can deliver audits, that this is what the current status is. or they can deliver their research findings in terms of a research report, that this is our expectation on given certain behavior. Let's say how many people want to talk about sending each other money, right? WhatsApp, before building WhatsApp payment, may have gone and done that research, right? Or how do they think about these P2P payments? So that is an interesting way. Or you can do a market research, like how many tools exist to solve same sort of problem. There is Venmo. In US, there was Venmo. In India, there are not that many. They're splitwise, or people do just IOUs or buy things for each other. So UPI really had to come for that thing to make sense. And as far as I know, WhatsApp payments is one of the features that came to Asia first, and I don't think it still exists in USA. So that is how you could do research, and that could be the deliverable of research teams. The deliverable of designers is typically documentation, and it is also your prototype or final designs, right, in whatever format you have. It can also include assets like animation or your icons, images, all those pieces as well. And once you move on to engineering's deliverable, backend engineers deliver APIs, endpoints, a front-end engineer deliver working front-end UIs which work and integrated with the backend. And then there can be various factions in there as well. And then we talk about, we can also get deeper into QA. QA's delivery typically is how many, to make sure that the release candidate which is ready does not have too many bugs, right? So they are assessed on how many bugs did they prevent, which is a very difficult thing to measure in itself. Product marketing managers will be assessed on how much adoption they are able to get, how many eyeballs and they're able to get. Then product managers may be getting measured on anything, like how well the product worked, which can mean how many people used it or how many people paid for it, or how many people saw it, or how many people talked about it. There can be various factors depending on why the business is doing that kind of particular kind of product. In the end, the entire company delivers the entire product and makes a profit. That is the deliverable for business. So I hope that covers, all the things that that we had to speak about. One of the interesting things I wanted to talk about is in engineering, what happens is in front end, we did not speak about is they will think about components. They will think about, they will break down UI into components, into layouts, and various states and variants of that component. So they can start developing those. And then often they will discover states that you have not spoken about. And that is what, during handoff process between design and engineering, that is what that handoff process looks like. So engineering can talk about, hey, you forgot about what if a user enters, you have taken the fact that if user enters 0, we don't allow to proceed. If user enters 100, we allow to proceed. What if user entered 10.9.3.789? Is that allowed, not allowed? So these kind of start cases you will start to see come up. And there's various frameworks you can make to make sure that you have covered as designers majority of the part and not left it to engineers. As product managers, you can build those frameworks to make sure that you have another checkpoint before it goes to engineering, so you can reduce that back and forth. Because a lot of time, engineering will take a lot of time to look at it, and by the time designers have moved on to another project, and they have to then work on dual project while fixing the old projects. That starts to happen a lot of times, especially in companies where the roadmap is massive. In all of this, when we spoke about framework, when you have done those prioritization and scoping with various products, you will put them into a roadmap, right? What the roadmap will look like is, this is the time we have, and this is all what we will achieve. These are the company goals, and this is what all we're going to do to achieve that. And you can break that roadmap down into something called Gantt charts, which is, these are the people we have, and these are the weeks we have or days we have, and these are the projects that we are working on. So maybe I can quickly show you what a Gantt chart looks like on, I'm going to quickly share my screen to show you what a Gantt chart looks like. Folks here as well should be able to see as well. So you are able to see my screen, and a Gantt chart looks like this, right? So what we have going on here is you have number of weeks. These are the people that could be, or like number of people assigned there, and these are the projects that could be assigned. Or you could have something like this assigned, that in a given project, this is how a given project will play out without talking about people. There can be various ways you make this, right? For example, they have put name of the people who are working on here and projects here. So this is what a Gantt chart looks like. A roadmap can look very similar, but has very different features. So product roadmap typically looks like very similar to Gantt chart, as you can see. But the biggest difference is this is like a zoomed out version, right? Of like, this is what we're going to do in Feb, May, versus where there we're talking about weeks and people. Here we're talking about teams. Web team will do this, mobile team will do this. So this is what some of your, uh, features and documentation can look like depending on the what you're talking about, like Gantt chart. Gantt chart are built for very different reasons. Then there are burnout charts, there are burn-in charts. How do you ensure a P3 level of bugs to be prioritized more? I see its level up much slow rate. Do running separate sprint with dedicated rev? Yes, this is one of the biggest pain points of P3 bugs not getting solved. So one of the like designers get super frustrated with it. One of the ways we used to solve it, and I've continued that practice for the longest time because it really makes sense, is you have an idea as a designer that where most of your P3 bugs, visual bugs that have not been fixed, that should have been fixed, are coming from. Maybe it's in the footer, maybe it's in that one feature nobody uses, or not many people use. Every once in a while, let's say every quarter, you should do one audit report. And you can look for my video on my channel where I talk about ticket design for designing 4,000 types of ticket framework, where I talk about audits in a deeper detail. And an audit can then list out not only individual bugs, but it talks about, boss, when I go to sign up, first this pop-up comes to allow, then this modal window comes, then I close this, then I have to scroll down, and then this bug comes, right? So you put it in the entire context, this P3 bug is coming and how it's jarring the experience. And in an audit, then you make the whole collection of P3 bugs which are easier to solve. And then once you make it into an audit document, it's much easier for product manager to convince, or you to convince the rest of the team that these all should be addressed. Then it's much easier to assign a week in roadmap or in Gantt chart to that entire document or audit to fix the issues in that audit, which could be all P3 and P4 bugs, P2 and P3 bugs. But again, the impact is that you have to build that business case, right? And me and Hardik also spoke about this topic in a little brief on my recent video on my YouTube channel, building a business case for design as well. So go check out that video on ticket design where I talk about audits, and go check out where Hardik talks about building a business case for design. He talks about some nuances there as well. But yes, do audits, right? Collect all those things and talk about from overall user experience, how these compound and make the experience worse. And you can do a usability audit, you can do a heuristic evaluation, and present an overall finding that if we do these overall bug fixes, our overall UX will feel more polished, right? One of the biggest reasons they don't get picked up is ROI is low. So thinking about how could you measure the improvement that comes from this could be interesting, but that could be tricky, right? For example, you could be just talking about change of font that has been long pending. But you could technically make an argument that if we have fixed the font or type setting on our website, then the trust factor may increase. But it's very hard to measure that and attribute that to font change. But yeah, then it comes to your idea of storytelling and visual storytelling. Make presentation which highlights bugs, and probably I will like share one of the audit reports one of the interns did at Head Out. Maybe that could be the next live next week, where we look at some audit reports done at Head Out. And even the audit Murari spoke about in the ticket designing, sorry, a ticket, a framework or design system for that also contains a ton of factors about building business case and resolving these conflicts. And and how an audit is done, like none of those individual problems like product card does not look nice would be solved at all. But when you build a business case that boss, product cards are one of the most critical features that people use, and these are tens of like problems they suffer with, then it's much easier to convince people to invest in that product. So I hope that helps. Any other questions, folks, that we can cover? I'll take a shot every time King says Gantt chart. Okay, we do have a Gantt chart and submit before our design project. It was such a hilarious word. Yeah. And yes, I think that covers all the questions we had, folks. Do you have any framework or predefined audit template which can bring out more impact? Check out the scorecard. I have in my ticket design video. I made a scorecard which was very impactful for people. Like that scorecards that when I sent out I told people forget the report, people getting overwhelmed with 50-page report. I told them, and then I moved the scorecard like in some of the audit reports on top. So in that, I share one of the pages where you can create a scorecard. Based on various factors, you can give score to each and every step, each and every element on the screen, and then rate, okay, in our, let's, for example, let's talk about your auditing search experience, right? So in there, you divided the entire search flow into a funnel. First, the person clicks on the search, right? Then what happens? Then somebody enters the search query, and then they click enter or search, and then the search result appears or says no search result found, right? And then somebody clicks on the search result or searches again, right? Once you build this funnel, now go through each step and evaluate it at various steps. If you're evaluating usability, you will have different things like, is it obvious, is it natural, does it you know does it honor heuristics and standard patterns, common patterns of design, or if you're doing like some sort of SWOT analysis, comparing it with a competitor, then it could be it could look like very different audit. But scorecards in audit can be very powerful because they um, kind of pseudo quantify the problems you're talking about, that out of all pieces, this one part of the funnel is really, really bad, and this is how bad it is. Product managers wear a lot of hats, for sure they do. um, you know there's, how can a designer become like a product manager mentality? That's a very good question, Balaji Rao. Brilliant question. And thank you for your earlier question, Kunal Sahu. We're taking question from Balaji Rao. How can designers become like product managers? In a sense, they don so many hats, right? Um, this is the secret of product managers, that you start to learn every team's vocabulary, right? You start to learn their mental models. Now, what are mental models? When I say screen, button, navigation, header, footer, you as designers understand what I'm talking about, right? Because those are that is a shared vocabulary, that is our mental models. We can think in these terms, right? These are terminology, as people call it. But terminology can be broken down to two parts. A, you understand a concept. You can understand a concept without knowing the terminology, which we call vocabulary. So learn both mental models and vocabulary. It's possible you call it something else, they call it something else, right? You may call it pop-up, they may call it modal window, right? So you've got to know what those terminologies are and where is appropriate. So learning about basics of what API, how APIs work, how engineering basic things work, how computers talk to each other, can help you a lot in becoming a better designer. For example, there's a concept called asynchronous, right? Which, if you have ever hung out with front-end engineers, you would have heard of it. When you load your YouTube screen, or when you, especially on your mobile phone, first the skeleton loads and then the content loads inside. And I'm not talking about that loading skeleton animation, that's separate. Even when the real screen loads, there's a second of delay, and you would have seen when your phone is really slow, that delay happens, and then the content comes in, right? Because the front end has rendered, but now the back end is using network and internet to fetch that data from API and then display it here. Now, if you understood that as a concept, right, and you could talk to your engineers that, boss, in this page, I want this piece to load upfront, right? The data should come with the page. Everything else can be loaded asynchronously. That gives you power as a designer, a vocabulary as a designer that you did not have otherwise, right? Earlier, you could only say, load this fast, the other can load slow. But you guys go like, that's weird, right? As a designer, you go like, why would I ask anything to be loaded slow? But when you understand how API calls are made and their own limited bandwidth, then you can prioritize how content loads and how API calls are made. And then if you understand business, you can then put effective measurement for your own design, right? You can set lead and lag metrics. And we talk about this lead and lag metric situation in that video from panel discussion that I posted out as well. Lag metric is something that you see eventually with success of the product. Let's say Apple launches Apple Watch. The success of the lag metric is the revenue they get. Once they get the revenue, they know anyway, right? But how many people start inquiring about Apple Watch? How many people start visiting that page? How many people start asking for it, looking at the Apple Watch at store? These are all signals that can tell you that more people look at it, more people search for that term or land on the landing page, the more people are interested and then are likely to buy. So the other numbers we talked about are lead metrics. They are giving you signal in advance, right? But the final metric will be lag metric. So as designers, you'll be able to come up with your own lead metrics. Like, if I'm improving the design of this page, then I know my hypothesis is that person will not bounce off, right? So bounce rate now as a designer can become my, in certain projects can become my lead metric, and finally whether they take an action or not can be my lag metric. But for product manager, whether they take that action or not can be lead metric, and whether they convert or not can be lag. So that is the chain that it takes on. Adit Gupta, do you consider counterfactuals to consider the causality of business decision? I asked it just because nice session. Hey Adit Gupta, thank you so much for joining in. It's a wonderful surprise. I'm not sure if I understand your question, to be very honest. Um, do do you consider counterfactuals to consider the causality? Oh, okay. Now, do you mean like in a sense like both sides of facts are debated, like um, I'm not sure like how to understand that question. UX sheep, if you could repost, it'd be really nice, Adit. And once again, thank you for joining in. UX sheep asks, are the responsibilities of a CX designer, customer experience designer, on more closely related to those of a product manager? You could say that, but again, like we spoke about, a market awareness is typically a domain of product manager, and combining this perspective, bridging this perspective from market all the way to a single user, which a UX or a CX designer may have, is typically like product manager's role. They can come very, very close. Like at times, literally, we have been working on projects when I used to work as a designer with product managers earlier, or when I worked as a designer with product managers recently. Like, you can't tell who's product manager and who's designer in real collaborations, and that's what they look like. You don't care about titles. Like at times, product manager gives the best design idea, or engineer gives the best design idea, and a designer talks about the best technology that they have seen, right? So that is what those collaborations can look like. There are huge overlaps for sure in what UX people do and what product managers do, but UX folks, for example, may not focus as much about API design, building time, legalities. For example, when we were at Head Out, we were talking about should we add that cookies wala notice or not. The reason people add that cookies notice is because of GDPR, right? Journal Data Protection Law in EU, which is European Union. Then I had to read an actual legal document, which is the entire GDPR, uh, right, to understand how it may impact us. And then only I had a guesswork. Okay, from my understanding of this legal document, as a product manager, I don't think it applies to e-commerce sites as much as it applies to content sites. So that could be, that is one way which a UX person may not do. Like as UX person, you may not read the legal document, right? Another amazing question is, Balaji Rao again asked, how does designers beginner's journey map in their career look like? Does it start from designer getting into product manager, or two does big? So there are two very different roles, product designer and product management. They are two very different roles. A lot of people may switch. Typically, more product managers want to become designers than designers becoming product managers. I am one of the rare cases who did the reverse and then stayed in both. But they are very separate fields, and they're close enough that may be able to switch, but there's ample of specialization within. They have quite a different bit of work as well. They're not similar jobs, to be very honest. Um, Ronak Goshal asked, what is the difference between user experience and customer experience? So, user experience. So let's talk about this. This is very interesting. CX is a traditional, typically an enterprise term where we get it from, and it talks about the entire customer experience as UX would imagine it. As UX designers, they would imagine, like, from customer support to sales to this, to the policy, to how they are responded to, templates to SOPs to, um, all of those pieces are part of customer experience, right? So your customer support team is also part of customer experience team, right? Because in the end, customers interact with them. In some places it may not be, but in most cases it is. But UX is very small subset of that, right? UX may dictate the language in so very, very, like, design mature organization. UX may come down to collaborating with support in what kinds of words should be used to manage what kind of emotions. But it will the how an SOP and support is done will largely remain in the domain of CX and not in the domain of UX. Yes, man. Happy to discuss. And folks, do like I'm super surprised that Adit is here, because I've been planning in one of my list of people to interview. a designers to interview who has been one of the top in the list. So looking forward to like already announcing it here. Uh, go trouble him on Instagram or Twitter. Twitter is where he's more active, so we can get him on the channel and talk about his journey, because I want to know. Balaji Rao asks, please answer my last question. I am aspiring tech business and design enthusiast. I would help a lot. Again, like, what does their map and journey look like? Most product managers do not start out outright as product managers. Most product managers were either engineers or designers or data or business analysts or sales folk, one of these people before. They were doing something and then they switched to product management, because product management is a very nuanced, it's a very ambiguous field. A lot of people who join directly from graduation to post graduation and then to product management, they may struggle a little bit because it's a very practical field. Influence matters more than your technical knowledge. So if you want to get into product management, start in one of those areas, then you can switch. Much easier to do that way. And if you're a product designer, I already have a video on how to start your design career right now without a degree or a certification. Can person be both front end and develop? And yes, we call them in the industry unicorn designers, because designers who know how to code front end are unicorn. I, for example, can code a little bit of CSS, HTML. For example, my own personal website, kingsiddharth.com and 64notes.com, both are designed and like coded by me. It runs on Jekyll. Folks on Instagram, the stream is about to end, so please click the link to join us on YouTube. So that is, it's invaluable, but it's not necessary, right? But you can be both. In fact, I know people who are backend and front end and are damn good at design. Those people are insane. Another one comes from Rona Ghoshal. Are dark patterns something US designers should adopt? No, no, no. As designers, there's an interesting pattern. As UI designer or graphic designer, you may have been at times forced to adopt them, but think about it, like it is, we keep talking about ourselves as guardians of users, right? Especially as a UX designer. If it does not benefit, most likely dark patterns will not benefit your users. You should put that question out there of like, most, let's talk about like, why do people put dark patterns? Because you want to increase a number. 2 download buttons exist, and out of those 2 you want the fake one to be clicked more, right? Or you may be talking about what do you call, I want to increase my the checkbox is pre-filled or it's hidden, because you don't want people to do that action. It's UX designer's job to call that out, that boss. Then if you are damn sure that this is not a good action, then why do you want to hide it this way? For example, Facebook is now popular with dark patterns, and I can't imagine them as what pressure UX designers they have to go through. So ethics is one of the basic parts of designer skill set, and being able to debate and ask the hard question is part of your job. But if you're a junior designer, you may not have enough influence to start that question, but you will always have a friend who has friends in high places who can get that question started. And honestly speaking, the moment you start questioning the dark pattern, more truths come out. And at times we have gone like, okay, we'll design you an entire ad network, right, for sidebar. Just don't do this dark pattern bullshit. Do you think designers to know a bit of marketing? And if yes, where do you think it will help? Yes, we should know marketing, because marketing and us designers share a tradition, a history together. Marketing and marketing, like you can think about like them relating to a lot with the ad world. And ad and marketing world is where a lot of initial bit of design also developed. Not only ad and marketing industry, but we share a lot of like a concept of like brand with them. We share concept of messaging and storytelling with them. So there are a lot of common concepts, and knowing marketing will help you how your product is perceived. It will help you sell your product and ideas better. I would highly recommend to learn some basics of marketing, and don't learn 5P, 3P marketing, traditional models of marketing. They're outdated. See what people are doing out there for marketing, what brands affect you and why, right? And there are tons of like the digital marketing content mental models are much more detailed from a psychological understanding of psyche point of view than traditional models maybe. Prasanna Kumar asks, user goals versus business goals. How do I balance as a designer? Beautiful question, Prasanna Kumar. Beautiful question. Thank you for that. You have to align those goals instead of balancing those. If you start doing this, then, and at times it happens, you will have to balance those, right? But you make that trade-off extremely clear, right? You make business agree that we should minimize the pain for the user, and how can you minimize that? That keep coming up with suggestions that minimize it for the user, right? To balance it again and again, a business will keep arguing from business point of view. It is your job, like literally, to argue from user's point of view, because the user is not present in the room, right? Aligning it works great. For example, WhatsApp wants you to use WhatsApp payments, and I want to use WhatsApp payments when I want it, right? So what things as designers could you do to make it more likely that I find it when I need it, or I adopt it, and all those other debates start, right? So how do you align those two goals? So it could be, then you could suggest placement, you could suggest ideas, various ideas, right? So once you have when a design department is proactively listening to problems, when designers are proactively listening to problems and giving solutions, dark patterns usually don't emerge. They usually emerge when design is failing what business thinks should be happening anyway, or if they are just misaligned ethics, which is also true in many places. Akshay, so that is, try to align those goals is my answer. Akshay Sheller asks, hi Siddharth, is there any way to utilize atomic design in agile sprint methodology? Yes, 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 yes. Beautiful questions today. I'm loving this live stream. We are getting just amazing question after amazing question, folks. So if you've not looked up atomic design, Google atomic design. Brad Frost came up with this. This is the starting of design systems, right? Where we start talking, evolve from style guides to design component libraries, right? The interim stage between when we finally evolve to a system. So how you can combine with agile? Now, what agile methodology is, essentially it says, okay, good enough clarity is good enough to move to the next step. So when you have the next step clear, let's move there. And because we don't wait for the entire picture to become clear, we can change our direction at any point, right? Because at every 2 weeks, you get imagine I go like, okay, 6 months, engineering will build this project. They're frozen, that's it. Now only after 6 months can I question that project. But if I'm following agile, at every 2 weeks, I get to ask, okay, this project is taking longer. This new opportunity has come. So let's chuck that, no matter how much we have worked on that project, and let's start this other project, right? So that is agile. Now, when you're working on atomic design, what you could do there is talk about that, boss. This is how our component library will evolve in the future. For example, our cards, product cards will have these shapes. Our landing pages will have these things in the future. But currently, they only have this clarity. We only have this component ready. So you get this out. Meanwhile, we'll get you other things, right? For example, we could go like, okay, right now the standard headlines are like this, but now we have updated our typesetting. Now we update those other standard headlines, right? So they can, in fact, really be powerful way to do agile, like really powerful way. And if you have, once you have a pre-made library, the first version, let's say you go like, you don't invest designers' time, you come up with like designer uses only pre-existing components to build a new product, and then you take it forward from multiple ways to collaborate on that front. Ajit Panghari asks, how do you approach designing for less tech-savvy people? Is less friction enough? One of the biggest problems that happens with less tech-savvy people is that they don't have tech mental models. For example, some of you, if I tell you reinstall Windows or reinstall your OS, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, if I ask you to reset SRC on Mac, you will know what shortcuts to press. If I tell you, hey, factory reset your iPhone, or do a reset, not a factory reset, you will know the difference, right? Those are mental models that we have as people working in tech. When we say non-tech savvy people, that's what we mean. We mean people who don't have same mental models as us. Two things you want to do is not think in your mental models, understand and research their mental models. One of the critical ways to research mental models is language. Language is the key to a person's thinking, right? For example, this is one of the stories my UX researcher friends told me, that they built a dashboard of apps, mini apps for enterprise customers in Africa. Now, they had mini apps that were supported by third parties, And these are cloud apps, so you don't have to install anything. So you just activate and it's done. But people there grew up on mobile, right? Each app is installed. So they were super confused. Eventually, in one of the cases, they changed that activate button to install button, and people just started using it, even though nothing was getting installed. Why? Because install as a mental model they understood, activate as a mental model they did not understand. So you have to go in the ground, speak to your users, hear them describing and talking about the problems your product solves, not about your product, but the problem your product solves, and then use their language, their vocabulary. For example, at Instamojo, the payment link product, one of the biggest products till date of Instamojo that we had built back in the day, and now every competition has it. The word payment link actually comes from customers. We used to call them offers. Create an offer on Instamojo. What does that even mean? Our customers, we learned from that they call it payment link, and we're like, that makes so much sense. And once we started using the vocabulary, it made so much sense to people. We did not have to write any tutorial, we did not have to write videos or do any of that. Another thing you can do is create content, video content, where you explain, for example, my mother can understand any English interface as long as you explain it to her in English, in Hindi. It's not that she can't read English or understand it. She can, but she's not going to comprehend this. There's too many levels to this thing. So I tell her, yahan click karo, yahan download karo. So she gets it. She understands all those mental models. So you can create these kind of videos as well to start experimenting. What kind of mental models may be becoming aha moment for your customers. So I hope that answer was helpful. And again, thank you once again, Ajit, for your question. Akshay asks, yes, that gets hectic to change every unit design element we design in the last sprint. I understand, but that is how Agile works, right? That is why a lot of design follows waterfall at times. And then, designers will wait till all clarity comes, but engineering picks it up in Agile methodology. So you don't have to pick up sprints in design. And in very rare cases, I have seen design sprints working only in, let's say, cases of services companies, it works. Ronak Goshal asks, unicorn designers can't cover all the bases as well as advertise. Does this put unicorn designers on back? No, it does not, right? Like, as unicorn designer, you know what you are getting hired for. Like, if you don't want, if you like, if it depends. If you're selling yourself, okay, I will do backend and front end and design, then it's a different thing. But if you're saying I'm a designer who understands front end, backend, and engineering, then it's not going. You're not going to be back foot. It's going to be an advantage. So understand versus I'm selling it to you are two different things, right? Vishwanath Krishna asks, can a product designer become a product manager? For sure, for sure. Some of the best product managers were product designers. Balaji Rao asks, what do you see the future of UI UX in AR VR? It's great. How do you think that we should get started with? Again, I think it's gonna be big. It's obvious. AR is for me more obvious, likable, ready to go blow out than VR. My personal biggest problem with AR and VR is I know how to do this live stream on YouTube. I know how to create videos. I know how to create podcasts. I know how to create photos for Instagram. I know how to create creatives for Instagram. And all of us sitting here watching, we know how to do that. We can pick up our phone or a laptop, any of them, and create content for any platform we know, from video, audio to text to images. But it's really not clear what do you use to make AR and VR content. It's not that easy. So content creation tools are not that obvious. You can use 3D. You will have to use 3D tools. You'll have to use mapping tools. You'll have to use like bunch of other tools. I'm not the expert there, but I can. Nitish, I'm asking soon to cover those topics, and I'm also asking him to open his YouTube channel so he can put more videos on AR VR, because I personally want to create like a VR world where I can host a party. Like, imagine all of us hanging out on like VR YouTube live. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, let's hang out in VR already. Lego out. How start after 12 to become a product manager? You cannot directly become a product manager like we discussed earlier. You can, but it's very difficult. Like, I would not suggest just first become an engineer or a product designer, or like, it's rarely that you get directly into product management. I would say if you really don't have any other interest, try sales and marketing digital marketing before you get into product management. So then you can, from marketing, you can go to product marketing, and then you can enter product management. So that's all, folks. We have been speaking for over an hour now, even including accounting for the glitch. The last question we'll take is from Ronak Ghoshal. Haptics is something that has always existed in the medical world. Why don't we see it widely being used everywhere? We do see it being used actually. The vibration on the phone was the first use of haptic and tactile feedbacks. And then we see phones doing it more and more and more refined, the softer one, the lighter one, the more major one. Things like Apple Watch use it a lot, right? Like it can do it for timing, it can do it for messages, for certain kind of notifications. We see that on a lot of on MacBook's trackpad, right? It's a tactile feedback which feels like a deep press. So yeah, I mean, and specifically, I'm not sure what you specifically want to cover in haptics. If you have a specific examples of, you know, like I mean, we are obsessed with touch screens. Yeah, like I'm not sure, like where do we not use it? All right, folks, that brings us to the end of discussion. Let me know any of the topics that interested you that I should make a detailed video about. This was a very brief overview, I understand, even though we've been speaking for an hour with each other. But I'm sure like we can get like literally there can be 1 hour video on just one of those frameworks to discuss their pitfalls, when it's good time to use it, when not good time to use it. I'll be bringing more videos on product management or on design, on engineering, inviting other folks to talk about these topics as well. So let's take a couple of minutes. Whatever questions and topics that you want me to write more about, take 2 minutes, write it in the comments section below. And if the live chat switches on, you can write in the comments, and that will help me a lot. I'll make sure I take those lists and make add it to my content plan, and then we can get started there. So whatever is it that you want to talk about, anything from today or anything that we did not cover today that I should cover in the future, let's get down to it. This Saturday, I'm coming out with my new vlog, which is gonna be a first time I've written a comedy sketch and multi-character comedy sketch. So looking forward to it. So if it's already like been a while since I posted this, you will find the link here. You can just click here and see the vlog, or if you're watching live right now, you have to wait till Saturday. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much, folks, for joining in. This was tons of fun. I hope to do lives more often. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and send it to friends who may be interested. Thank you once again. Good night. Go Corona.